All right.
Mr. Chair, is former Delegate Carr in the room?
He
Yeah,
is. His camera is
we
not on
are
here.
live delegates.
Thank you, Ralph. Good morning, everyone. This meeting of the Montgomery County Land Use Transportation Public Safety Committee is called to order. Thank you for being here an hour earlier than our previous time. We have three bills on the agenda to discuss today. Um, we may or may not try to vote on one of them, but as I was discussing with our staff before we went live, there may be an issue as to whether or not we have the formal written amendment from the bill drafting office yet, in which case we may have to wait on a final vote of that. But let's start the conversation with MC 825, which is Delegate Moon's bill. The draft amendment, which I believe the committee members have seen in concept, would remove uh, the section from page 3, line 25 through page 4, line 5, and would really make the bill sort of much more limited in scope and um, not involve this issue of requiring, starting in October of 2025, funds and fines collected under the camera program to be used for the construction of median dividers. Delegate Moon, not required to, but if there's anything you'd like to add, feel free.
No, the bill essentially is giving the county more time to make these changes and giving them a more reasonable number of bus stops to have to move or otherwise deal with if it had a large number of tickets in the last year. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Great. Appreciate that. So, to your last point, looking at page 4, lines 10 to 12 of the bill, that's where it talks about starting in 2028 that this would apply to locations, bus stop locations, where there have been at least 400 citations to drivers coming in the opposite direction from the bus stop. But there isn't an explanation of how we measure the time span for when those 400 citations uh, happen. And I think you and I had a conversation about maybe looking to the previous fiscal year or the previous calendar year or the previous school year. Um, does it make sense to entertain pursuing some kind of small amendment to that section as well, just to clarify that, since we're going to have to finalize the other amendment anyway?
So the amendment that we are actually in the process of like making sure we have the final document does have that. I think we talked about it either in the larger delegation or it came up somehow last week in a conversation. So we did add the per fiscal year as well.
Oh, great. Okay. So once the formal amendment is ready, it will already include that. And I'm hopeful that we will get that this week and then we will be able to review it and take a final vote next Monday. But we can't take a vote on it until we get the formal final draft amendment. Anybody have anything else they want to add or any other questions they have about MC 825? Okay, not seeing anything. We will move to MC 1725, sponsored by Delegate Solomon. Um, Delegate Solomon, you're welcome to make some brief introductory remarks about the bill if you like. We've obviously already had the public hearing and we don't need to get into too much detail, but we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just make two quick comments. One, excuse me, is this bill is basically in the identical form as it passed unanimously out of the House delegation and then overwhelmingly out of the full chamber, got sort of stuck in judicial proceedings, I think for reasons unconnected to the priorities and policy of the bill. And this is something that we've been partnering on with the county and the county police for the last 2 years. And then the only other piece that I will comment on, the chair and I have been working on just making sure that municipalities. We made some changes last year to the bill, I think, as some of you might remember, to ensure that municipalities could be included in it. And we were discussing last week just making a minor tweak that if municipalities don't have sort of a formal Vision Zero or a plan that's referred to as sort of the high injury network corridor plan, we could adopt a quick amendment that says, or something similar, to make sure that if a municipality wanted to exercise similar rights, but didn't necessarily have a plan that is specified exactly in here, it would still be covered. And obviously, if you were going to put something on a state highway, you would still have to get approval. You'd still have to get the permit from the State Highway Administration, even covered under this law. That's just how the speed camera process works. So that would ensure there was some level of oversight, but we want to make sure that if Gaithersburg or Rockville or any of the other smaller municipalities that have their own programs would want to take advantage of this change, they could do so as well.
Thank you, Delegate. Yeah, I mean, the bill as written refers specifically to a strategic highway safety plan or a Vision Zero plan. And there are some municipalities in the county that have similar plans that aren't called that. It's just a matter of the titling of the plan. And we just wanted to make sure that if they do qualify for all the other factors and requirements of the bill, that they would have the opportunity to exercise the rights under the bill as well. So we'll work on getting that through drafting as well for a formal amendment to vote on next week. Does anyone else have any questions about that, or any other questions or comments about MC 1725? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we will plan hopefully to vote on that and an amendment when it's ready next week. And thank you very much, Delegate Solomon, for being here. Okay, and then our final bill for today's agenda is MC 20-25. And this is Delegate Kaufman's bill. He inherited it in a sense from former Delegate Al Carr, who we invited to be here to answer any questions with us today as well. Good to see you, Mr. Carr, former Delegate Carr. And good to have you with us, Delegate Kaufman. So with respect to MC 2025, I just want to remind the committee there was an original version of it, and then there was a yellow sheeted version, which is, sort of an amendment by the sponsor before the bill became final. So you should have the yellow sheeted updated version of that bill on the Google Drive that was circulated by staff. That bill has what in my mind is some significantly different language than the first one. So let's make sure that we're all referring to that one in understanding the scope of the bill. With that, Delegate Kaufman, Al, if you all want to make some brief remarks, again, reminding everyone we don't need a full presentation of the bill since we've already had the public hearing, but brief remarks, particularly with respect to the changes from the yellow sheet, I think would be helpful.
Okay, well, first of all, let me just thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Spiegel. And I just want to say that this is a top priority for the Montgomery County Sierra Club. And the changes, I have done extensive due diligence. I met twice with Montgomery County Department of Transportation, and also once with Montgomery County Department of Planning and Mr. Enton, the lobbyist for the home builders. And so the changes that you see are in direct. I'm open to feedback, so they are in direct response to the feedback that I have received, and Al and I have been continuously in contact with the stakeholders, and I know we want to be brief, but if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I will have Al very briefly explain some of the changes that we made in response to the feedback and a little bit about what the bill does and what it doesn't do, because we think there's some misconceptions.
Sure, appreciate that. And Mr. Carr, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everybody. For the record, Al Carr, I'm here as a volunteer for the Montgomery County Sierra Club. And yeah, basically this bill is intended to just transfer a very narrow, very specific function from State Highway Administration as part of the development review process to local government. It's a function, it's just involving streetlights in the public right of way, street trees at the time of permitting after a project's been approved and it's time to implement it, from SHA, which is not necessarily focused on this activity, to local government, which does a very good job of it. So the bill is, clarified on that it only applies to these two activities. It only applies to private development projects. And beyond that, I'm here for any questions.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I had a couple of questions, very sort of technical questions about the language, to make sure that it reflects the intent that you just described. First, the term design decisions related to, I think we've had a couple of questions from folks about how do we know the precise definition or contours of what is considered a design decision related to a street lighting or a street tree. Is it about the location of the lighting? Is it about the type of post? Whether it's an ornate post or whether it's some other kind of overhead design or snakehead lighting. Is it other aspects? Does it need to be clarified that we're talking about something more limited than that? And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think the type of questions that come up on these projects are, what exact, manufacturer and model of light, what species of tree are you going to put in, what is the height of the pole, what's the plate, are the lights and the trees staggered so they're not, the tree won't grow in such a way that it blocks the light. It just those sort of basic decisions about that would go into a permit of exactly where these things are laid out and exactly which specific you would be installing.
Okay. And then you've got section 2 of the bill kind of divided into non-state highways and state highways. And so for the non-state highways, there's language referring to private development projects. So this is really only related to private development projects that abut a highway. But then is the intent to apply that same language, that same limitation also to section 2 sub 2 for state highways as well? So that basically it's only private development projects, regardless of whether it's a state highway or a non-state highway?
Yeah, I don't have the language in front of me, but I think what it's trying to say is that, whatever entity that does these approvals on a non-state highway, like on a local road, would be the entity to do it on a state highway. So, if you're in Gaithersburg, Gaithersburg would be issuing right-of-way permits on a city road. That's the same entity that would be doing the approvals along a state road frontage for a project. That's the intent.
Okay. Thanks for that. Go ahead.
Just very briefly, if there's language that you think that would make the Sierra Club's intent more clear, I'd be very open to that, Mr. Chair. So go ahead.
Great. I'm happy to talk with you offline about that, delegate, but want to make sure that our committee members have an opportunity to raise ideas or ask questions as part of our committee meeting today. And if not, we can have one-on-one conversations offline as well. And my hope is that like the other bills still on our agenda, we can finalize any additional amendments that might need to be considered before next week so that we can take a final vote on it next week. The other question that I had was with respect to regulations, either by law or by federal requirement, flow down to the State Highway Administration. If there are certain rules and requirements where a state highway, might not be allowed to put a tree in a certain location for some reason based on some, federal safety regulation that they're obligated to comply with in order to get federal funding, or not put a certain type of light here or a certain light in that location. How does that play into this bill? Would that be overridden by a county decision? Or a municipal decision, or would the county or municipal body that's making these final decisions and approvals still be required to comply with a requirement that is imposed on state highway for a state highway road that might be in their jurisdiction?
Yeah, I would think that there's no intent to skirt any sort of federal regulations or that might be imposed on State Highway Administration.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee members? Going once, going twice. I don't see any, so I think the plan will be we will work with the sponsor on making sure that the language of the amendment looks good, or to see if there need to be any other tweaks based on the conversation we've had, and try to get it all finalized so that we can take a vote next Monday.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate, for being here. Thank you, Al, for being here. Okay, any other questions, comments for the good of the order from the committee members? All right, seeing none, we will plan to meet again next week at 11 a.m., not noon, 11 a.m. And hopefully, if it all goes well, and hopefully I'm not jinxing it, we will have all the formal amendments in place to reflect the conversations that we've had on these final three bills in our queue. And we'll be able, if the committee so desires, to take votes on the amendments and the final bills and move them forward. And that may be our last meeting of the session. That's my hope and plan. All right. Thank you all very